Part 18. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 171. Mrs. Li's eyes suddenly lit up, and she pulled her husband towards her courtyard. Niuniu stayed to take care of Chang Xiao. The couple closed the door, and Mrs. Li cried non-stop. The rules were set for me on the second day after I got married, but they were not set for my younger siblings later. I am the eldest sister-in-law and I have to provide food for my younger siblings. Do you know all this? Sun Jiaxing was furious when he heard this. Does your mother look down on me? She obviously looks down on you. She loves the second and third younger brothers so much that she is not willing to torment the second and third younger brothers. Every time I serve, I am the one who carries her feces and urine, and I have to catch her vomit with my hands. I am just a slut, and there are a room full of girls and women in the house who can't see me, and I am the only one who torments me. One after another, Li was weeping every word. She had complained to Sun Jiaxing about some things, but Sun Jiaxing didn't take them seriously. As time passed, Ms. Li stopped complaining to her husband. Now after listening to Niuniu's words, Ms. Li thought about it. Whether she listened or not, she could just get angry at him, so as to prevent him from thinking that he was living a fairy life in the inner house every day. After every word she said, she would add, "Your mother doesn't like you." The wounds of the couple were placed together, making them miserable together. Old Mrs. son was not idle now, and summoned her two sons to her as if they were urging someone to do so. Your eldest brother doesn't plan to take you with him to Beijing this time. As soon as Mrs. son said this, the two sons immediately looked at each other. Although they wanted to see the scenery of the capital, no one wanted to be controlled by a living father. It was good that the old lady was rescued in time, but if she was not rescued in time, the blame would really fall on them. Mom, we are not young anymore. We are both fathers. It is really outrageous to follow my eldest brother around all day long. Our families have been separated for a long time anyway. It is good to separate now. Mr. Sun expressed his position on the spot. Sun San followed closely behind. After hearing this, Mrs. Sun asked, "Do you really think so?" The two old boys nodded together. But old Mrs. Sun was still not happy and said, "Mom is so old and has to run so far away. I can't bear to let you go. Otherwise, I'll give you some advice." When the two old boys heard this, they were more panicked than anyone else. The second boy was smarter and said, "Mom, if you don't want us to let you go, we can stay. We will be filial to you. How wonderful this is." Old Mrs. Sun was a little moved when she heard this, but then she thought about it. The most important reason for going to the capital was actually the doctor. There are no good doctors at home. Doctors in the capital. Before Mrs. Sun finished her words, Mr. Sun said, "Mom, if the eldest brother is a high-ranking official, forget it. If he is a big-time official, he will probably not even be able to be invited to the imperial doctor. You won't be able to enjoy it even if you go there. It's all in vain." Sun Laosan was watching the excitement and said without hesitation, "Yes, it's a long way to the capital. You were fine originally, but maybe you were exhausted due to the long journey. If you really want to be filial, you should spend a lot of money to hire me. The doctor came from the capital to treat you." The two brothers were so eloquent that they actually convinced the old lady. Instead of going to the capital to make excuses with other old ladies, it would be better for her to stay in her hometown and be supported by everyone. Sun Jiaxing had just coaxed his wife and promised her that he would never ignore her pain in the future, when the old lady on the other side called him over again. "You're not coming to Beijing?" Sun Jiaxing was dumbfounded. Mrs. Sun said with a straight face, "It's a long way to the capital. If you are really filial, you shouldn't torment me like this." Sun Jiaxing didn't know what to say for a while. The old lady was afraid of death after all, so she explained the matter of calling the doctor in detail. Sun Jiaxing wanted to persuade him again, but the old lady was impatient and said, "You must be really filial and don't be afraid of people's words. Send more people to give me some rare coins. This way I can live a comfortable life and really miss you, okay?" Sun Jiaxing was very angry at these words. The old lady said this because she was blaming Sun Jiaxing for his false filial piety, as if he took her to the capital just to prevent others from gossiping that he, as the eldest son, did not support his mother. Sun Jiaxing was angry all night because of this incident. The next morning, when Niu Niu saw him, she immediately felt distressed when she saw the dark circles under his eyes. She walked up to him and asked, "Daddy son, can't you sleep?" Sun Jiaxing didn't want to tell his children about his troubles, so he just said, "I can't sleep a little bit." Niu Niu immediately said like a little adult, "I will teach daddy son a good way. Close your eyes and don't think about anything, and you will fall asleep quickly." Sun Jiaxing couldn't help but ask, "How can a person as old as you suffer from insomnia?" Niu Niu nodded and said, "Every time my mother takes me out to play, I will be so happy that I can't sleep at night." Sun Jiaxing said, "Then next time we take you out to play, we can't tell you in advance. Carrying you out in the morning can be regarded as a surprise for you." Niu Niu immediately became happy and said, "That's fine. As long as I think about going out to play, my heart can't calm down." Seeing the child's innocent look, Sun Jiaxing and Mrs. Li couldn't help but feel a little better. Niu Niu said again, "Is it because daddy son can't sleep because of happy things?" Sun Jiaxing suddenly fell silent as he thought about the ups and downs of the day yesterday. Mr. Li was still quick-tongued and said, "Your father is not happy, he is sad." "Why is daddy son sad?" Niu Niu didn't quite understand. Sun Jiaxing didn't want to say it. But Li thought that Niu Niu was just a child, and she could always think of some strange words to comfort people. She also hoped that Niu Niu could help to open up some of the secrets. "Your father doesn't know that they are the closest family. No one remembers his kindness after giving so much, and they are even on guard against him," Li said briefly. Sun Jiaxing was very unhappy. Niu Niu tilted her head and said, "If they don't treat you as a family member, you don't have to treat them as a family member." Sun Jiaxing felt that it was inappropriate to hear this, and said, "Family members are born, how can you say they are not family members?" Niu Niu said, "Dad son, am I your natural family member?" Sun Jiaxing was speechless. Niu Niu continued to talk about the truth that she understood in her little head: family members rely on each other. If they make trouble behind your back, they are not my family. If you keep giving without any response, everyone will be tired. Sun Jiaxing shook his head and said, "I didn't expect them to repay me. I just hope they treat me as a family member." Niu Niu said, "How can I not ask for anything in return? My mother said that if you don't ask for anything in return, you will really get nothing in return, so when you give, you should aim for a return." This is the first time someone has said this to Sun Jiaxing since he was a child. First update. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 172. Sun Jiaxing thought about it and asked, "Your mother is still looking forward to your return, what can you give her in return?" Niu Niu said confidently, "I can make her happy." Sun Jiaxing couldn't help but smile when he heard this, but after thinking about it carefully, he couldn't help but feel sad. Whether it's his brothers or his mother, it seems that no matter how much he gives, they won't make him happy. Li is different from Sun Jiaxing. When she heard that her mother-in-law would not go to the capital, she was as happy as if she had a double happiness. Now she saw that her husband was almost convinced by Niu Niu. Now she has a son and a daughter, her husband is an official, and her mother-in-law stays in her hometown. For her, this is almost the most comfortable life in the first half of her life. Our good boy is still transparent and understands more than us adults, Li praised with a smile. Niu Niu's face was full of pride, and she said, I will teach my brother Chang Xiao from now on. Li said quickly, Chang Xiao is so lucky to have such a great sister. Niu Niu was a little embarrassed by the praise, and said, I just know more about the principles. In fact, my knowledge is just like that. There are many things I don't understand. Sun Jiaxing immediately said, our good boy is also modest. He is really sensible. Anyway, what Niu Niu does is good in their eyes. But Niu Niu didn't smile with them, and her little face suddenly drooped. What's wrong? Why is the good boy suddenly unhappy? Li and Sun Jiaxing were very worried. I don't think I did my homework. Niu Niu cried. These days, she was either taken out by Sun Jiaxing to play, or stayed at home with Li and Chang Xiao. A room full of maids and old women coaxed her to be happy. She only needed to eat, drink and have fun, and had long forgotten about studying. When Sun Jiaxing heard this, he slapped his forehead and said, your father seemed to have mentioned homework in the letter he wrote to me. Blame me, I didn't take it seriously. Niu Niu didn't dare to play anymore. Sun Jiaxing picked her up and sent her to the study, saying, it seems that your father will arrive in the next 2 days. Let's catch up on our homework. Sun Jiaxing flipped through Niu Niu's homework and watched the little girl sitting behind the big desk with a bitter face, writing big words one after another. She was obviously rushing to finish her homework, but she didn't mean to be perfunctory at all. Sun Jiaxing lowered his voice, my dear, how about I help you write a few? I will imitate your handwriting, and your father shouldn't be able to see it. Niu Niu was moved for a moment, but she thought of Gu Mingda and Zhang Yuniang's expectations of her, and shook her head slowly. I'm not studying to cope with my parents' inspections, but they hope that I can really find a way out in books. I've already made a mistake by neglecting my studies because of my love for fun. If I ask Uncle Sun to help me with my homework, it will be a mistake on top of a mistake, Niu Niu said seriously. Sun Jiaxing felt a little ashamed when he heard this. He just wanted to help Niu Niu finish writing the big characters before taking the child out to watch the acrobatics. After Niu Niu finished writing the big characters seriously, she took out the book again. Sun Jiaxing accompanied her so that Niu Niu could ask directly if she didn't understand anything. After studying so hard for 2 days, Niu Niu spent almost all her daytime studying. Even so, she couldn't make up for the homework she missed. The Gu family had already arrived in Nanlin County. Even though Gu Mingda rushed, it still took 7 or 8 days to sort out the affairs of Guang'an County. There were many houses in the Sun family's house, so they directly cleaned up a yard to entertain the Gu family. Dad, Mom, Grandpa and Grandma, Aunt Lu, Big Brother and Third Brother, Niu Niu misses you so much. When Niu Niu saw them, she immediately flew over like a little swallow. Old Mrs. Gu hugged the little girl and called her my sweetheart. You've lost weight. As soon as old Mrs. Gu said this, her eyes immediately condensed. She weighed the little girl and said, you haven't lost weight, it seems that you've gained some weight, which shows that you're living well in the Sun family. Niu Niu smiled and said, my godfather and godmother are so good to me. My brother Chang Xiao also likes me the most. My godfather took me to eat the specialties of Nanlin, and took me to the temple fair. Niu Niu kept talking about the good things of the Sun family couple, and the Gu family was a little jealous. You had so much fun in the Sun family, do you miss us? Old Mrs. Gu asked deliberately. Niu Niu shook her head and said, I had a lot of fun at the Sun family, but I missed you guys too. I missed the gingerbread made by Grandma. The ones made by the Sun family kitchen always seemed to be a little bit lacking. I missed the little grasshoppers made by Grandpa for me. I missed the ballads that my mother sang to me to sleep. Listening to Niu Niu counting the good things about her family one by one, she made the Gu family members smile. They hadn't met for a long time, and no one was disappointed to check homework, but Niu Niu jumped out of the arms of old lady Gu and walked to Gu Mingda. Dad, I have been playing around these days and haven't finished my homework. Please punish me. Niu Niu took the initiative to admit her mistake. Gu Mingda looked at the little girl's obedient appearance, and his heart melted. How could he bear to punish her? Grandma Gu immediately took her granddaughter into her arms and said, "My dear, she has so much to learn from her studies. It's rare for her to have a few days off. She's also working hard to make up for it. Don't scare her with a sullen face." Gu Mingda felt at a loss whether to laugh or cry, and said, "Mom, where did you see me scare her? I haven't said anything yet, but you're protecting her. You never stopped me from dealing with the older ones before." Grandma Gu glanced at Gu Yan and Gu Zhao, then at the snowball-like Niu, and immediately said, "Niu is still young, this is different." Niu took the initiative to say, "Grandma, you should be punished for being lazy in your homework. Daddy is doing this for my own good." When Ms. Gu saw that she was so good, she was even more reluctant to let her be punished. She only said to Gu Mingda, "Second brother, your skin is delicate and will leave marks if you touch it. If you want to hit someone, just hit me." Not only was Ms. Gu ignorant, but Father Gu also said vaguely, "Grandpa, got beaten for my dear." Before Gu Mingda could take action, he encountered his own parents who wanted to kill each other. He immediately couldn't laugh or cry and said, "In your eyes, am I such an unreasonable person?" Ms. Gu curled her lips, "It's hard to say." Gu Mingda. Before Gu Mingda punished Niu, he felt as if he had become the sinner of the family. He did not make up his mind to punish the child corporally. Instead, he said, "When you get to the capital, for 3 consecutive months, you will have to write 5 more words every day. Zhang Dazi, do you know?" Ms. Gu still wanted to bargain, but Niu had already said crisply, "Okay, Daddy is so good to me." Seeing that the little girl accepted the punishment happily, Gu Mingda swallowed his explanation. In the old lady's yard in the backyard, Sun Jiaxing is still reminding his mother, "I accept that Niu is my daughter. It's a done deal and cannot be changed. Brother Gu is also a civil servant now. With his talent and learning, he will be named on the gold medal list sooner or later. Even if it is for the sake of the second and third brothers and the Sun family, don't give it to me tomorrow. Do anything out of line." Sun Jiaxing was afraid that his mother's accusation against Niu would happen again. Old Mrs. Sun narrowed her eyes and said, "Since it's all for the Sun family, don't forget to say hello to the county magistrate." The greeting Mrs. Sun said was naturally to seek benefits for her other 2 sons. These 2 people were causing trouble in Japan. If they didn't say hello to the county government in advance, they might be imprisoned one day. Second update. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 173. Sun Jiaxing's disappointment was about to overflow. He saw that the mother and son would be separated soon, but his mother not only had no warmth, but also tried her best to plan for her 2 younger brothers. No matter what, it would become a bargaining chip for her to threaten him. "Don't worry, mother. I will definitely say hello to the local county magistrate before I leave," Sun Jiaxing said with a sullen face. Old Lady Sun was relieved to hear this, and then said, "I know that you have a close relationship with that scholar surnamed Gu, but no matter how close you are still an outsider. Only your 2 younger brothers are your brothers. Even if you break your bones, you are still connected." Sun Jiaxing always heard these words, but he never felt so annoyed as he did at this moment. He regarded his younger brothers as his closest relatives. Did his younger brothers respect him as the eldest brother? The Gu family met old lady Sun the next day. Perhaps because of Sun Jiaxing's guarantee, old lady Sun behaved normally from beginning to end. Except for getting up early and leaving the table because of a headache, she was not much different from the old ladies of ordinary wealthy families. The reason why the Gu family stayed in Nanlin Mansion was not only to reunite with Sun Jiaxing, but also because of a major event related to Niu Niu. Both Sun Jiaxing and his wife and Gu Mingda and their wife loved Niu Niu to the core, so the ceremony of intimacy would not be too simple, as they were afraid of wronging Niu Niu. The ingredients for the banquet were prepared early, and it was unknown where Sun Jiaxing got them from. Everything flying in the sky and swimming in the sea was gathered together by him for this banquet. Not only did the mansion entertain the wealthy families in Nanlin County, but it also set up a porridge stall outside the city to provide relief to the poor, as a blessing for Niu Niu. The poor families came with their families to get porridge. They didn't know what it meant to recognize their relatives, but they only knew that they could get a bite to eat, so they kept saying auspicious words. However, the dozens of tables of guests in the mansion knew more about the matter, and there were rumors flying everywhere. The Sun family is really particular about adopting a godparent. I don't know what kind of godchild that child is that worthy of such attention. I heard that she is a 6-year-old girl. It's just a girl? Many families don't have such a grand marriage. This girl is so lucky. She is indeed lucky. Her biological father is a Juran, and now her godfather is a Bangguan. No matter how you look at it, this child has a very good life. In fact, her biological father is not a Juran. It is said that she is an adopted child. What? Being adopted and having a Juran father, this child, is she born lucky? Most people said auspicious words, and some even wanted to hold the child to get some luck, but some people said sarcastic words. If she was really lucky, she wouldn't have been abandoned by her parents. Maybe she was kidnapped. Whether she was kidnapped or abandoned by her parents, she doesn't look lucky. It is said that the Sun family recognized her because this child is a good child. Her adoptive mother's family has many children and grandchildren. Madame Sun hugged her and she became pregnant. This person said this, intending to say that the Sun family recognized her out of utilitarianism, but he didn't expect that several ladies who had not been pregnant for many years at the table would have thoughts instead. Li didn't understand why, and before she finished her meal, a bunch of officials and rich ladies ran over, vying to hug Niu Niu. Oh, this child is so cute, I can't wait to take her home. Yes, yes, you are still lucky, with both sons and daughters. Who in the whole Nanlin County doesn't envy you? A group of people surrounded Li and Zhang Yuniang, and Niu Niu became a hot commodity, and everyone rushed to hug her. But they were all so proud that they didn't make their words clear. They could only show that they loved Niu Niu very much. Since they all showed their love, they naturally had to express it. After Niu Niu was held by a group of women, her body was full of things. Zhang Yuniang held her in her arms and felt that the child was several pounds heavier. A woman who was eager to have a child put a pair of heavy gold bracelets on Niu Niu's wrists, and Niu Niu's hands were almost unable to lift up. Our Niu Niu is so lovable, Lu Xiru said happily on the side, and no one noticed anything wrong. And the group of wives who had held Niu Niu were also very happy, and they even compared themselves with each other. The lucky doll smiled at me, the rich lady said this, but she was thinking that she would definitely give birth to a big fat boy next year. I also kissed the lucky doll, the lady who said this, she took advantage of Niu Niu's inattention and kissed the little girl hard on the face, and then hung a big gold lock on Niu Niu's neck. I'm still awesome. The lucky doll said she likes me, the rich lady who looked a bit like Zhang Yuniang said proudly. Several people looked at each other, and then thought that each family might help each other, so they all changed their words and said, all good, the lucky dolls like us. Ugh. Hearing this voice, several people immediately surrounded the rich lady who looked like Zhang Yuniang, all with surprise on their faces. Are you pregnant? So soon? The rich lady smiled shyly and said, I don't know. It stands to reason that my menstruation will come in 2 days. I just hope that this time I can get what I want. The month is too early, and even if you go to the clinic now, you may not be able to diagnose the pregnancy sign. But these ladies seemed to see hope in an instant. They look glorious in the eyes of outsiders, but in fact, only they know the various sufferings they have suffered from not getting pregnant for many years. Early in the morning on the third day after the grand family recognition banquet at the Sun Mansion, the luggage of the two families were all loaded onto the carriage. Master, it's too early, the old lady hasn't gotten up yet, the old nanny said to Sun Jiaxing standing in the yard with an apologetic look on her face. Sun Jiaxing looked into the house with a cold face. It was pitch black inside, and there was no movement at all. He knew that his mother was angry with him, angry that he went to the county magistrate to say hello, not to take care of them, but to say that if the two brothers committed a crime, they must be severely punished. Not only that, Sun Jiaxing also went to the clan leader and asked the clan members to persuade the two brothers. Old Lady Sun was lying on the bed with her eyes open, waiting for her son to come in and apologize to her. But Sun Jiaxing just knelt down, kowtowed in the yard, and then turned and left. The old nanny looked at Sun Jiaxing's back as he left, and her heart was very uneasy. She had followed the old lady all her life, and felt that the old lady had probably miscalculated this time. By doing this, she would only push her most promising son further and further away. But the old lady still didn't think anything was wrong. When she heard that her son just kowtowed and left, she was so angry that she threw the pillow to the ground. Unfilial thing. It's better not to have given birth to this son, old lady Sun said viciously. When the nanny heard this, she looked at her nose and thought to herself that if the old lady really hadn't given birth to the eldest master, I'm afraid the Sun family would have fallen long ago. First update. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 174. It was still dark, and the carriage had already left the city gate. This time it was still entering the capital together with the caravan. Niu nestled in Zhang Yuniang's arms, sleeping soundly. Gu Mingde reached out and held down the curtain of the carriage to prevent the cold wind from blowing in and freezing the child. Zhang Yuniang said softly, with Niu by my side, I feel at peace. As she spoke, she brought her face close to Niu, smelling the unique fragrance of the little girl, and all the depression in her heart was swept away. During the time when mother and daughter were separated, Zhang Yuniang's heart was always worried that her child would get cold or hot outside. Or maybe you were wronged and got into trouble. Zhang Yuniang also knew that this mentality was unacceptable, but she couldn't change it. You have the deepest feelings for her. This is human nature, Gu Mingde comforted her softly. The carriage traveled from dawn to sunrise and stopped outside a post station. The group stopped to rest. Gu Mingde and Sun Jiaxing looked at each other. They both remembered what happened at the inn during their last trip. This time, the sun was shining brightly above our heads, but there was no disturbance at all. After lunch, the group continued their journey. When we arrive in Dengzhou, we will abandon the car and board a boat. Has Niu ever been on a boat? Zhang Yuniang asked her daughter in a soft voice. Niu tilted her head and thought about it carefully. I should have sat there. Zhang Yuniang couldn't help but laugh when she heard this. She had watched Niu grow up. Guang'an County is neither near a lake nor a sea. In her impression, Niu had never been on a boat. When did Xiaobao take the boat? Zhang Yuniang asked. I sat there in my dream, Niu answered seriously. Gu Zhao sneered and said, Niu, sitting in a dream doesn't count. Niu said, I think so. In the dream, I turned into a little baby. The baby was smaller than Chang Xiao. I wore a belly band, lay in a wooden basin, and floated along the raging river. After drifting for a long time, a wave hit me and I landed. Niuniu's description was extremely cute, but Zhang Yuniang's heart clenched when she heard it. The description in Niuniu's dream is consistent with the rumor that Mr. Li threw the child away. Gu Zhao didn't know that this might be Niuniu's real experience. He was still laughing. Niu, I said that there are countless things you can do in dreams. Such big waves in the river hit you. If you were really a little baby, you would have been beaten long ago. I'm drowning in water, how can I still go ashore? Niu was not angry after hearing this, but smiled and said, in dreams, anything is always possible. Last time you dreamed that you would become a high official. Gu Zhao shrank in fear when he heard this and glanced at Gu Mingde secretly, fearing that his father would force him to study and improve. Gu Mingde was angry when he saw his youngest son looking so worthless, but now that he was still on the road, he was not disappointed and pretended not to hear. Mom, third brother said that taking a boat in a dream does not count. Do you think it counts? Niu raised her little head and asked. Zhang Yuniang stretched out her hand to straighten her daughter's slightly messy hair and said, Mother, please stop this silly lawsuit. You can discuss it yourself. Although Gu Zhao didn't think that dreams could count, he loved his sister and said helplessly, okay, since you care about this matter so much, I agree that it can be forgotten. Niuniu's face showed happiness and she said sweetly, third brother is the best. When Gu Zhao heard this, he was immediately satisfied, as if he had been coaxed, and he replied belatedly, my sister is also the best. Niuniu asked, has third brother ever been on a boat? Gu Zhao immediately became less satisfied. No. Not yet. The child had a strange desire to win. Because he had never been on a boat, Gu Zhao suddenly felt as if he was a head shorter than his sister. Seeing him like this, Niu immediately said righteously, then what I was sitting on in my dream doesn't count. Third brother and I are the same. Gu Zhao's smile returned to his face and he said, okay, we are the same. Gu Zhao mysteriously took out a bag of crumbled pastries and brought it to Niu with a face full of pain, I'll give you half. But Niu knew better than anyone how greedy Gu Zhao was, and immediately said, I'm not hungry, third brother, you can eat it yourself. When Gu Zhao heard that his sister didn't want it, he was very relieved, and then he said as if he thought of something, Niu, you don't want it yourself, but it's not that I'm stingy and won't give it to you. I'm still a good brother, right? Niu nodded and said, it's me who is picky about food, not my brother who is stingy. After hearing this, Gu Zhao couldn't help but feel awkward in his heart, and said, I'll bring your favorite snacks next time. Niu nodded vigorously. Zhang Yuniang watched with a smile as Gu Zhao was coaxed by Niu and became dizzy. Both of them rarely interfered in the relationship between the brother and sister. But without any warning, the people in the carriage suddenly heard a violent cry of children. Its longevity, Niu immediately recognized her brother's cry. Zhang Yuniang couldn't help but show worry on her face. Chang Xiao's crying had no intention of stopping, but instead became more and more urgent. Niu's little face wrinkled up. Seeing Gu Mingde seeming to get off the carriage, she immediately said, Dad, I'll go take a look too. Gu Mingde rarely refused Niu's reasonable request. The carriage stopped and he carried his daughter outside the Sun family's carriage. The cry of a child could be heard through the carriage curtain, making people nearby feel very anxious. The caravan sent people over to inquire. Li in the carriage also blamed herself. The child was less than 3 months old. Someone had advised her to wait until the child was 1 year old before going to Beijing, but she insisted on going to Beijing with her husband. Now the carriage had only been on the road for less than a day, and the child couldn't be coaxed. Li wanted to go back along the way at this time, but she couldn't bear the thought of facing the unreasonable mother-in-law and the 2 sisters-in-law who were waiting for adoption all the time. Sun Jiaxing also had the idea of sending his wife back at this time, but he didn't say it directly. Instead, he asked through the carriage curtain, "Do you know why he is crying? Does he want milk? Has the wet nurse tried to coax him?" There were actually quite a few people in Li's carriage, but at this time the wet nurse and the maids and old women had no way to deal with Chang Xiao, who was crying non-stop. What was even more terrible was that Chang Xiao cried so hard that he Niang's daughter, the little baby girl who almost never cried, also cried uncontrollably. While Li was feeling uncomfortable, he Niang's was shrouded in despair. She couldn't coax the two children at this time. She felt as if she was standing by the river again with her daughter in her arms. As long as she took a step forward, they would have no chance of survival again. He Niang's felt that everything around her was gray, but there was only a crisp voice that cut through the fog. "Chang Xiao, why are you crying?" Niu Niu asked outside the carriage. The crying in the carriage stopped for a moment. Second update. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 175. Gu Mingde saw that this move was effective, and hurriedly sent Niu Niu to the carriage. As soon as Niu Niu opened the curtain of the carriage, she saw Chang Xiao had already turned his little face to the curtain. His little nose moved, as if he smelled Niu Niu's scent, and immediately stretched out a pair of hands towards him. Niu Niu was only 6 years old, so naturally she couldn't hold him, so she could only use one hand to hold his hand. Chang Xiao's white and tender face immediately wrinkled into a ball, making a wronged expression. Niu Niu whispered, "Be good, brother, let's stop crying, okay?" Chang Xiao tightly held Niu Niu's fingers, as if he was afraid that she would run away, and the grievance on his face gradually disappeared with Niu Niu's gentle comfort. "I don't know what's wrong with him, he keeps crying, and he won't let us wipe his tears. If we wipe them, he will cry even harder." Li looked puzzled. As Chang Xiao stopped, he Niang's daughter beside him stopped crying. Niu Niu took out the handkerchief in her arms and gently wiped the tears from Chang Xiao's face. Chang Xiao, who used to make a fuss when touched, was unusually well behaved when facing Niu Niu. However, when Niu Niu took a handkerchief to wipe the tears of he Niang's daughter, Chang Xiao seemed to be jealous, and his mouth kept drooping, as if he would cry again in the next second. Seeing this, he Niang's wanted to hug her daughter far away. Although it was cold today, it would be easy for the baby's face to be chapped if the tears were not wiped dry, but she was more afraid that Chang Xiao would be unhappy, and thus make Li displeased. Although Niu Niu was young, she was already very much like an elder sister, and gently coaxed her brother, "Be good, we must be generous and good children." Chang Xiao's mouth drooped, and then Li saw with her own eyes that her son, who was less than 3 months old, had a flattering smile on his tender face. "Your sister is still powerful, she has plenty of ways to deal with you, a little bad guy." Li stretched out her hand and tapped Chang Xiao's nose. Chang Xiao turned his head away in dissatisfaction. Li scolded, "I work so hard to give birth to you, you little brat, but you don't feel sorry for me at all." Little Chang Xiao didn't respond to her mother. But Niu Niu stuck to Li and said obediently, "Godmother, my brother is still young. When he is as old as me, he will be especially considerate." Niu Niu praised two people with this sentence. Adults boasting will only make people bored, but children are different. Li felt that Niu Niu looked so lovely. She couldn't help thinking that even if her third brother's wife's family exchanged their twin daughters for Niu Niu, she would definitely not exchange them. Such a considerate and well-behaved daughter is really hard to find in the world. In the second half of the day, Niu Niu sat in Li's carriage. In the Gu family's carriage, although Zhang Yuniang was happy that Chang Xiao finally stopped crying, she couldn't help feeling empty without her daughter. However, she also knew that Li needed Niu Niu more than she did and would never let Niu Niu suffer any grievances. Gu Zhao suddenly said, "I also want to go to the carriage at the back." Zhang Yuniang was stunned and asked directly, "You can't bear to leave your sister?" Gu Zhao nodded, but didn't say what was hidden in his heart. He wanted to accompany Niuniu and Li, because Li always had a lot of cakes and preserved fruits in her carriage, and she didn't limit how much the child ate. But Gu Zhao has always been very cautious when it comes to eating, and he instinctively felt that it would be better not to say it. Zhang Yuniang was also thinking of ways. After separating from her daughter, she realized how difficult it was for mother and daughter to be separated. Before dark, the carriage entered the next post station. Perhaps because the journey was too bumpy and Xiao Changshao was too young, he didn't sleep well at night. He suddenly cried in the middle of the night, and Niuniu, who was originally sleeping upstairs, was sent downstairs by Zhang Yuniang. In the second half of the night, Niuniu slept directly with her brother. The next morning, just after breakfast, Zhang Yuniang pulled Gu Zhao to run to Li. Sister-in-law, Ah Zhao kept saying yesterday that he wanted to be with me. I thought I also took care of a lot of children, so why don't I take Ah Zhao with you so that you can take care of him, Zhang Yuniang said. Compared to accompanying her husband, Zhang Yuniang wanted to accompany her daughter more. Li was naturally overjoyed when she heard that Zhang Yuniang wanted to help, and said, "Sister-in-law, I should have been polite, but with the relationship between our two families, it would seem strange if I refused." Li's carriage was spacious, so she sent two maids to the back of the carriage and replaced Gu Zhao and Zhang Yuniang. Li was originally afraid that a boy like Gu Zhao, who was only 7 or 8 years old, would make a fuss, but she didn't expect that Gu Zhao would be quiet because he stuttered. The Sun family was large and powerful, and they never cared about a bite of food. After Gu Zhao finished eating, the servants would fill his mouth, and Gu Zhao's mouth never stopped. Zhang Yuniang's eyes were about to be connected into a line, but Gu Zhao pretended not to see it. He had only been in the Sun family's carriage for half a day when Zhang Yuniang drove him away to accompany Gu Mingde. Zhang Yuniang's arrival did relieve Li's pressure. The older women around Li were not energetic, and the young and strong maids had no experience in raising children. Even He Niang had only given birth once. Zhang Yuniang was young and experienced, and she taught her all the little tricks of raising children. When he is 6 months old, you don't have to feed him milk all the time. You can add some rice paste to him and slowly feed him some mashed meat and vegetables, Zhang Yuniang said. Li was surprised. I was thinking of letting Changshao drink milk until he is 3 years old. Zhang Yuniang said, many wealthy families raise children like you. My method is the way of rural families, but according to my observation, raising children in this way can make people stronger. Li was doubtful, so she asked again, sister-in-law, how many children in your family were raised like this? Zhang Yuniang nodded. Li looked at Zhang Yuniang with envy, not because she envied her having many children, but because she envied Changshao for being extremely well behaved when she fell in her arms. Apparently Zhang Yuniang was good at holding children, making Changshao very comfortable. Sister-in-law, please teach me. Every time I hold this child, he won't be happy after a while, Mrs. Li said eagerly. Zhang Yuniang shook her head gently and said, I will teach you at least 5 months later. Li was puzzled. You have just given birth to a baby, and your body has not fully recovered yet, so you should hold the baby less. Zhang Yuniang continued, this is what my mother-in-law taught me. I gave birth to 3 children. In the first few months, except when breastfeeding, my mother-in-law never let me hold the children. Even when breastfeeding, she always leaned on them like this. Hey, so now I rarely have back pain. When Mrs. Li heard this, she felt mixed emotions. They all married into the same family as the 3 brothers. The Sun family was rich and powerful, while the Gu family was an ordinary rural farmer and lived a poor life. But the Gu family's parents-in-law are kind and willing to love and care for their daughter-in-law. This kind of family atmosphere is far beyond comparison with the Sun family. Mrs. Li had always felt that her life was good, but suddenly she felt that Zhang Yuniang was the one with the real good life. She had a good husband, doted on by her parents-in-law, good luck with her children, Gu Yan was sensible, Gu Zhao was lively, and Niu Niu was a peerless good daughter. Except for her second son, almost everything in her life was no regrets. She even wondered in a daze, if she were the Gu family's wife, would she be Niu Niu's favorite mother now? First update. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 176. Zhang Yuniang didn't know these messy thoughts in Mrs. Li's mind. She said at this time, brothers and sisters, we women should also take care of ourselves. If there is any problem, we should treat it as soon as possible. We can't let a minor illness turn into a serious illness. Now I feel pain in my lower back on rainy days. I asked the doctor to prescribe medicine, but it didn't work. Li just said it casually and didn't expect Zhang Yuniang to give any solution. After all, Zhang Yuniang was not a doctor. But I didn't expect that Zhang Yuniang really had a way. Zhang Yuniang immediately said, just taking medicine is not enough. You can try Bajuanjin. Li didn't really want to move. Zhang Yuniang said, I was like that for a while. My husband once met an old doctor in Fukan and he taught me this. After practicing for a while, I really improved a lot. Li's eyes suddenly lit up. Now that the carriage was full of women, she had no scruples. She asked Zhang Yuniang one by one about many minor problems. Sister-in-law, thank you for meeting me. If you hadn't taught me, I wouldn't have known how to do this. It's not easy for us women. Although we all look forward to having children, to be honest, after giving birth once, I realized that I had suffered a great sin. As Li talked, she seemed to have regarded Zhang Yuniang as a guiding light. That night, before falling asleep, Zhang Yuniang taught Li another trick. If a child cries for no reason at night, you can put a pair of scissors under the bed. This is a folk trick used by country people to ward off evil spirits and pray for blessings. You can also try it, brothers and sisters, Zhang Yuniang said. After hearing this, Mrs. Li immediately followed the instructions and in the shortest time, she found a pair of scissors and stuffed them under the bed at the inn residence. That night, Zhang Yuniang held her daughter's soft little body contentedly and fell asleep. Mrs. Li was also very happy, because this method really worked. Chang Xiao didn't cry all night long, and even when he was hungry and wanted to drink milk, he only grunted twice. One is willing to teach and the other is willing to learn. The relationship between the two has improved by leaps and bounds after riding in the carriage for a few days. Li has almost become Zhang Yuniang's second god-sister. Lu Xiru saw that the situation was a bit distasteful. She hadn't played with Niu Niu for a long time, so she found an excuse and squeezed into the Sun family's carriage. Lu Xiru was originally an ordinary woman. If nothing unexpected happened, she would dedicate her life to her husband's family like many unknown young ladies. But she opened a shop not long after her divorce. During this year, she often dealt with customers, and now she has learned to speak eloquently. Not long after, laughter came from Li's carriage. Li's face almost overflowed with envy as she listened to Lu Xiru's business stories. Hearing Lu Xiru talk about the bad things she encountered in the business world, she was also anxious. There are such bad people in the world. You have obviously helped him make money, but he is still secretly causing trouble behind his back. He has no regard for his conscience. He also secretly takes defective products and pretends they are yours, which almost ruins the reputation of your braised food. Li asked repeatedly. Lu Xiru said with a smile, Sister Li, don't worry, now that I can speak out, everything has been resolved. Mrs. Li breathed a sigh of relief and said, such a malicious person should be severely punished by the government. Lu Xiaoru nodded. The government fined Cheng a large sum of money. Chunfeng Restaurant's business was poor, so Cheng discounted the price again and again before selling the restaurant at a low price. I heard that he was unlucky. In Guang'an County I can't survive after offending someone, so I've already taken my whole family to another place. Hearing this, Ms. Li smiled and said, "When I heard what you said, I finally felt relieved. Such a wonderful story should be written into a storybook and put on the stage so that everyone can beware of this bad guy." Niu Niu listened at the side and said immediately, okay, there is a good show to watch. The story already exists, but who will put it on stage is also a question. The three women all hurt Niu Niu to the core, and no one wanted to let Niu Niu down. The three of them looked at each other. Lu Xiaoru shook her head vigorously. Zhang Yuniang said, "Brother and sister, you are still very quick thinking. It's just a pity that Xiaoru and I don't have much writing in our hearts. I'm afraid we don't have the ability to write it out. Why don't you, brother and sister, do it?" Ms. Li was already moved. When she heard this, she took the job with a few words of humility and said, "Since you all said so, it would be false for me to be modest." The carriage traveled on the road for a month and finally arrived in Dengzhou. Because I was about to abandon my car and change my boat, I decided to rest in Dengzhou for a day. Chang Xiao was too young, so Sun Jiaxing and his wife stayed in the guest house to take care of the children, while Gu Mingde and Zhang Yuniang took the children to wander around the city. After buying some special products from Dengzhou, the group walked to the pier. "What a big river," Niu Niu said, looking at the endless river surface. In order to let his daughter see more clearly, Gu Mingde directly lifted her up and put her on his shoulders. So high, Niu Niu was very excited. Such a wide river is indeed a wonderful sight for a little girl who grew up in the mountains. "Niu Niu, this is the Jik River. Our Guang'an River in Guang'an County is one of the tributaries of the Jik River," Gu Mingde patiently explained to her daughter. Niu Niu immediately said, I know. Daddy's son told me that he said that there are not only tributaries of Jik River in Guang'an County, but also in our Guanglan Prefecture." "Niu Niu has a really good memory," Gu Mingde praised. Gu Zhao on the side saw the father and daughter chatting for a long time without stopping, and suddenly he jumped up and down anxiously. Dad, it's my turn," Gu Zhao urged. Gu Mingde didn't understand what he was saying for a moment. But Niu Niu reacted quickly and said directly, "Dad, put me down, I've been watching for a while." Gu Mingde was immediately furious when he heard this. He suddenly stood up and carried Niu Niu on his shoulders. Gu Zhao thought they were queuing. But how light is a little girl, how heavy is a stinky son. After Gu Mingde gently put his daughter down, Gu Zhao took 2 steps back, then took a run up and hit Gu Mingde like a small cannonball. Even though Gu Mingde was tall and strong, he couldn't help but groan when hit by this bastard. Gu Zhao didn't take it seriously at all, but used his hands and feet to climb onto Gu Mingde. "Dad, let me try to climb up by myself first," Gu Zhao said excitedly. Gu Mingde. Gu Zhao climbed for a while and found that he couldn't climb up, so he immediately said, "Dad, help me." Gu Mingde listened to the bastard's confident words, and his eyelids twitched, but he still lifted the man onto his shoulders and sat him down helplessly. But when he lowered his head, he saw Niu Niu looking at him with worried eyes. Gu Mingde's heart melted. The bastard didn't realize his problem at all, but kept saying, "Dad, can you hold on a little, I want to stand on your head." Gu Mingde glanced at the turbulent river in the distance, and wanted to throw this unlucky child down on the spot. Second update. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 177. Gu Zhao had no idea of Gu Mingde's mood, and he was still talking, "Dad, help me. Just help me. I'm so powerful, look, I'm stepping on your head." While Gu Zhao was talking, he didn't wait for Gu Mingda to react, he jumped up and climbed Gu Mingda as if he were a tree. Gu Mingda was hit on the head by his own son several times, and he couldn't bear it anymore, so he pulled the unlucky child down. After landing, Gu Zhao was still dissatisfied. "Dad, I stand up and step on your head, so I can see the farthest. I just seem to see fish tumbling in the river." Gu Mingda said directly, "You are right, you can see farther if you stand up, then you stand up straight, and I'll step on your head." Gu Zhao. Gu Zhao immediately hid behind his mother. "I won't stand, don't be angry." Gu Mingda was too lazy to pay attention to this naughty child. But Zhang Yuniang felt that Gu Zhao's behavior was not appropriate, and her eyes immediately looked at Gu Yan. Gu Yan was used to taking the responsibility of educating his younger siblings, so he reluctantly pulled his younger brother to a corner and taught him softly. Gu Zhao had a bitter face. He would rather be scolded than listen to Gu Yan's nagging. He began to feel sleepy after listening to 2 sentences. Gu Yan was very serious. "What did I just say? Can you repeat it to me again?" Gu Zhao opened his mouth slightly, his eyes full of confusion. Gu Yan had a good temper and said, "You are distracted? It's okay. I will tell you again." Gu Zhao felt as if there were 1,000 bees buzzing around him. "Little brother, if you teach your brother like this, he won't remember it." Suddenly, an old Taoist priest in a dark blue Taoist robe spoke up. The old Taoist priest looked like a fairy, and people felt that he was a Taoist master at first glance. However, no matter how fairy-like he was, Gu Yan's first reaction when he saw this person was to pull his younger brother behind him and look at the old Taoist priest vigilantly. The old Taoist priest seemed to have not heard anything, but continued, "Brother, you can't teach your younger brother by talking, you still have to beat him. If you don't want to beat him, you can also let others beat him." Gu Zhao, who was hiding behind his eldest brother, heard this, stuck his head out and glared at the old Taoist priest. "Bad guy. You actually let my brother beat me." The old Taoist priest laughed, without any embarrassment on his face. Gu Mingda and his wife did not walk far with Na Yuniu, and they stayed not far away, staring at the 2 brothers. After seeing the old Taoist priest chatting up, the couple immediately walked over with Na Yuniu in their arms. "Dad, this bull-nose is bullying people," Gu Zhao hurriedly asked the adults to make a decision for him. Gu Mingda protected his 2 sons behind him and was about to ask the old Taoist priest what he was going to do. The old Taoist priest spoke in advance, "My husband, it seems that all 3 of your sons have extraordinary fates." The Gu family was shocked when they heard this. This is not Guang'an County. The Gu family couple took their 2 sons and 1 daughter out, but they didn't expect the old Taoist priest to blurt out 3 sons. The old Taoist priest continued, "My husband, you are not an ordinary person. This trip to Beijing is a sign of rapid success." Ordinary people would have been delighted to hear Taoist priests and monks say this, but Gu Mingda was always indifferent and defensive. "I am very grateful for the good words of the Taoist priest," Gu Mingda said politely and was about to leave with his wife and children. Unexpectedly, the old Taoist priest stopped them again and said, "My husband, please stay." Gu Mingda had no choice but to stop, but he still remembered what his mother said, and he was always on guard against the Taoist priest. "My husband and the 3 sons are all talented, but the most extraordinary one is the youngest daughter." Gu Mingda's eyes suddenly turned cold when he heard this. The old Taoist priest faced the other party's sharp eyes, but did not step back, but continued to say, "Sir, can you let me see your daughter's face?" Na Yuniu looked at the old Taoist priest curiously when she heard this. Zhang Yuniang immediately turned around with the child, and then pressed her daughter's face in her arms, making sure that the back of her head was facing outsiders. Old Taoist priest. A trace of confusion flashed in the old Taoist priest's eyes. He didn't know what he had done wrong, why this family was so defensive. "Just take a look at the face, don't worry, I'm not a bad person, the old Taoist priest said pitifully. Gu Zhao got angry when he heard this and stamped his feet. You are a bad guy. You just asked my elder brother to beat me. The old Taoist said, you deserved it? Your brother told you that you were distracted several times. Gu Mingda said, we don't have the habit of beating children. As soon as he said this, his own son broke it on the spot. Gu Zhao was surprised, really? Gu Mingda's fist hardened again. The old Taoist said, I am proficient in face reading. I can know the past and present life with just one look. I don't charge money. The old Taoist also felt strange in his heart. Ordinary people would have sent their children to him long ago when they heard him say this. But Gu Mingda was stubborn and always on guard. Seeing that Gu Mingda was not convinced, the old Taoist turned to look at Zhang Yuniang. My lady, you had a miserable first half of your life, but you will enjoy happiness in the second half, with a phoenix crown and a bridal robe, and a royal decree. But Zhang Yuniang was even harder to fool. She said directly, since the Taoist priest is so capable, please help me calculate where my second son is now. Is he suffering? When the old Taoist priest heard this, he really calculated, and then just said, when the time is right, you will meet. He was telling the truth, but the listeners were all disappointed. It was the same as if he had said nothing, just like the nonsense said by ordinary street fortune tellers. The disappointment on Zhang Yuniang's face was about to overflow, and the look of seeing a liar deeply hurt the old Taoist priest. No, I really have the ability. But it was useless to say these words, because Gu Mingda and his wife ran fast with the children. The old Taoist priest wanted to chase, but was tripped by someone. A beautiful young man in brocade clothes pulled him and said, Master, they can't tell, you tell for me, I believe you. The old Taoist priest wanted to break free, but the young man in brocade clothes brought too many followers, and a group of people blocked his way. The young man in brocade clothes said arrogantly, I like fortune telling the most, tell quickly, if you don't tell well, I won't let you go. He thought to himself that he had a lot of money anyway, and he was not afraid of being cheated, so he just regarded it as helping the whole family. Today was another day of doing good things. On the way back to the inn, Nayunia whispered, Dad, Mom, do you hate Taoist priests? If you hate him, then Nayunia will hate him too. Gu Mingda pondered for a long time before saying, Nayunia, Daddy doesn't like Taoist priests because of the old family affairs. You are still young. You should judge for yourself whether you like or dislike a person, instead of being kidnapped by your mother and me. First update. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 178. When Niu heard this, she hesitated for a long time and then said, I'd better hate him. Niu doesn't want to go against her family, she wants to be a good child. Gu Mingda was stunned when he heard this. Niu likes that old Taoist priest? Can Niu tell the truth to her father? Zhang Yuniang asked. Niu didn't want to lie to her mother, so she nodded gently and said, he has a nice fragrance. Zhang Yuniang and Gu Mingda looked at each other, and when they recalled it, they only remembered the scent of sandalwood on the old Taoist priest's body. The smell smelled no different to that of a Taoist temple. Why did Niu like it so much? Niu thinks he is a good person, Niu said again. Compared with the previous sentence, this sentence is much more lethal. The family has already reached a consensus. Niu feels that good people are mostly not bad people, at least they have not turned bad yet. Gu Mingda thought for a while and said to Niu, it's Dad's fault. I should have asked Niu what he thought just now. Niu immediately said, why should Dad apologize? Niu will never blame Dad. Hearing this, Gu Mingda felt soft in his heart. Dad, I will help you find that old Taoist priest in a moment, how about that? Gu Mingda asked gently. Nayuni's understanding was that she didn't want to be different from her family, but Gu Mingde was afraid that her daughter really liked this old Taoist priest, and that the old Taoist priest might represent a certain opportunity for her daughter. Niu shook her head and said, "Although I feel friendly when I see him, I don't have to see him." As if she was afraid that Gu Mingde would keep thinking about this, Niu asked again, "Dad, can I eat the wontons? I saw the wonton stall before. I wasn't hungry at that time, but I'm so hungry now." When Gu Mingde heard her daughter say she was hungry, she didn't care about anything else and hurriedly carried her to the wonton stall. Gu Zhao eagerly pulled Zhang Yuniang towards the wonton stall, fearing that he would be late and miss the hot ones. Nayuni likes ginger first, and her second favorite is wonton. It was at the wonton stall last year that she became a child loved by her mother. In Nayuni's short memory, wonton seemed to always carry the aura of her mother. Niu took a bite with the spoon and immediately said happily, "It's delicious." Niu always brought a sense of magic to her meal. Gu Mingde and his wife, who were not hungry at first, couldn't help but swallow their saliva. Then the whole family ate at the wonton stall. While Gu Zhao was eating, he also made a wish. It would be great if there was roast chicken to go with it. Gu Mingde glanced at his unlucky son, then put down his chopsticks and went to buy a roast chicken. When Gu Zhao saw that his wish came true, he immediately took advantage of it. "I'm afraid it's not enough to eat only roast chicken. I just saw someone selling meat buns. God, can I eat meat buns today?" When Gu Mingde heard this, he didn't move immediately. Instead, he asked others if they wanted to eat meat buns. Everyone else shook their heads. When going out, Gu Mingde would basically satisfy the children's demands as long as they were not outrageous. He got up and bought a bun and placed it in front of Gu Zhao. "I really want to eat candied haws. I can eat 5 skewers at a time," Gu Zhao said loudly. He had a beautiful idea. If he bought 5 skewers at a time, he could keep 4 to eat slowly. Zhang Yuniang was the first to sink her face. "You haven't finished replacing your teeth, so you are not allowed to eat sweets." Gu Zhao did not take his mother's words seriously, but looked at Gu Mingde pitifully with his big eyes open. Gu Mingde chuckled and said, "I really want to beat my children. I can beat 5 like you at one time." Gu Zhao turned off the engine instantly. After leaving the stall, Gu Mingde said again, "This roast chicken tastes good. I will buy another one for my mother to try." Niu took out the money and said, "I'll pay for it." Niu has money. Not only does Niu want to buy it for her grandparents, but she also wants to buy it for her godfather, godmother, and Aunt Lu. Gu Mingde immediately said, "I'll buy your grandparents. You can buy one for your godfather and godmother. Mrs. Gu and Dad Gu are old and tired from traveling, because they did not go out today, but stayed in the inn to rest. Is this the roast chicken I bought at the pier? Did Yun Niang choose it? You don't need to taste this roast chicken, you can tell it's delicious just by smelling it. My daughter-in-law is considerate and thinks about us even when she's out." When Mrs. Gu said this, the voice was very loud, as if he was afraid that others would not hear. Zhang Yuniang knew her mother-in-law's temperament very well, and she was going out of her way to show off to her daughter-in-law. She smiled and explained, "Mom, my husband-in-law bought this to honor you and Dad. He thought it tasted good, so he wanted you to try it too." Mrs. Gu added, "He is a grown man with a rough heart. He knows so much. You must have reminded him." Ms. Li, who was not far away, looked at the scene and her eyes were red with envy. She didn't know how many good things she had given to old Mrs. Sunday. Her mother-in-law didn't forget the slightest bit of kindness, not to mention helping to make faces, and even gave them away after changing hands. To the other 2 daughters-in-law. When she was envious, Niu ran over holding a roast chicken wrapped in oil paper. "I bought 2. One for my godfather and godmother, and one for Aunt Lu," Niu Niu presented the roasted chicken as if she was offering a treasure. Whether it was Sun Jiaxing, Li Shi or Lu Xiaoru, they all looked extremely moved. My dear, you went out to eat delicious food and you still remember me. You are so kind to me, Lu Xiaoru said. If we really want to talk about contribution, the amount of money Lu Xiaoru spent on Niu Niu was much higher than what Niu Niu gave back to her. However, Lu Xiaoru would be extremely moved if Niu Niu gave back anything in return. Li and Sun Jiaxing were a little different. This was the first time that Li received filial piety from her children. She looked at her daughter and immediately turned on the filter. Niu Niu has grown up and knows how to respect her parents. In her heart, she almost raised this small action to the 24 filial piety. Niu Niu saw that they were happy, and she felt like she had eaten honey. Then she ran to the side of the old lady Gu and explained, "Grandpa and Grandma, it's not that I don't want to be filial to you, but Daddy is too filial. I can't pay him." This explanation made the old lady Gu very happy and said, "Grandma knows that our good boy is the most filial child. Grandma loves you for a reason." The guest house was full of joy, but the young man in brocade clothes on the dock had a pale face. Originally, he wanted to help the Gu family out of trouble and took the initiative to pester the old Taoist priest. But when the old Taoist priest really told him his fortune, he found that he was right. Not to mention how many people were in his family, he even knew how old he was when he started eating meat and what kind of dogs he raised. "Oh, if I were you, how could I still have the mood to go to Linzhou? I'm going north to Beijing now." You don't even know that disaster is coming," the old Taoist sighed. The young man in brocade clothes knelt down on the spot. "Please save me, Taoist priest, and save the lives of my whole family." The second update. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 179. The next morning, everyone abandoned their cars and boarded the ship. After boarding the ship, some people began to feel seasick. Fortunately, the elderly Gu and his wife, as well as several children, did not react. Others were also fine. Even if they reacted, they would not be unable to stand steadily. Only Zhang Yuniang felt seasick on the first day, but she did not react much. On the second day, her seasickness worsened and she even had difficulty getting out of bed. Niu Niu did not feel seasick, but she was anxious when she saw Zhang Yuniang's pale face from seasickness. "My dear, don't worry. We will take a boat to Beijing and arrive soon. Maybe when we reach the next dock, I will not feel so dizzy." Zhang Yuniang endured the discomfort in her heart and kept comforting her daughter. Niu Niu put her little face next to Zhang Yuniang's face, trying to make Zhang Yuniang feel more comfortable in this way. Gu Mingde, who was standing by, felt bad for his wife and advised her, "Take a nap first. Maybe you won't feel seasick when you fall asleep." Zhang Yuniang leaned against her sweet and soft daughter, and felt strangely at ease. Niu Niu reached out and patted her mother gently, singing a song to lull her child to sleep. Zhang Yuniang fell asleep slowly. After seeing his wife sleeping soundly, Gu Mingde breathed a sigh of relief and asked others to help take care of Zhang Yuniang. He turned around and asked someone for a solution to seasickness. Niu Niu immediately followed, grabbed Gu Mingde's hand, and whispered, "Dad, I'll go with you." Gu Mingde thought of his daughter's good luck and nodded, but he also said, "My dear, if we can find it, forget it. If we can't find it, we won't force it. If your mother is really uncomfortable, we can just take the land route again, but we will go to Beijing more slowly. We are not in a hurry, understand?" Gu Mingde said this because he didn't want his daughter to use her special ability. Niu Niu nodded obediently and said, "Niu Niu, be obedient and don't let your parents worry." Gu Mingda touched her little head and then picked up the child. Before in Dengzhou, the Gu family had bought some food such as plums, but this antiemetic that worked for other people had no effect on Zhang Yuniang. This ship is the king of Dengzhou shipping companies, which can carry 500 people at a time. Gu Mingda thinks he can always find a few seasickness recipes. But unfortunately, the solutions the boatman gave him were just a few familiar methods, and these methods had long been proven to be useless to Zhang Yuniang. Hey, when we get to the next dock, we will change to land, Gu Mingda said to his daughter. Although he said that it was okay to change the route, it would be slower to go to Beijing by land, and he might not be able to take the imperial examination in time. If he could not take part in this imperial examination, he would have to wait another 3 years. Nayuniu had also heard the adults mention this matter. She understood the importance of taking the waterway, and Zhang Yuniang also understood it, so Zhang Yuniang never mentioned changing the route. Dad, the boatmen have no way, let's ask others. Ask other guests. Ask one by one, maybe we can really find a good solution, Nayuniu suggested. Gu Mingda and others lived in the upper classroom, and he was not used to disturbing others presumptuously, but for his wife, he held Nayuniu and asked one by one with strange eyes. He started asking from the upper class area, and the attitude of the people there was not bad. But they still couldn't give a useful solution. Gu Mingda asked all the way down, and even asked in the lower class cabin. The lower class cabin only had beds, no private rooms, and the people living here were inevitably mixed, and their attitudes were not so polite. Some people saw that they were well dressed and thought they were rich, and wanted to rip them off. Gu Mingda didn't care about spending money, but the so-called exclusive secret recipes of these people were all things that were common on the street. If it was just a scam, it would be okay. There were also people who relied on their large numbers to sneer at them, without any reason, and directly spoke ill of them, and even waved their fists at every turn, as if they wanted to teach them a lesson. Although Gu Mingda didn't know why these people had such a bad attitude, he covered his daughter's ears and didn't argue with them, but went to find other people who were willing to communicate. When no one was around, Nayuniu clenched her fists and said angrily, "Daddy, if they scold you, I will scold them. I will scold them back for you." Gu Mingda touched his daughter's head, chuckled, and said, "Reason should be told to reasonable people." Nayuniu was still very unhappy and said, "Even if they don't understand, I will say that Daddy is the best, how can they scold you?" Although Gu Mingda was very happy to be defended by his daughter, he still said, "My dear, it's just a momentary verbal pleasure. You just saw that their clothes are dirty and ragged. Several neighbors left their hometowns to make a living together. They don't look happy. They just dare to talk to us like this because they have more people. If we meet them somewhere else in the future, I'm afraid they will avoid us. This kind of people are bad," Nayuniu said with a puffed mouth. Because there is a boatman watching them, they dare not do it directly. Gu Mingda knew that they didn't dare to do it, but he still felt scared. He had always been thoughtful, but today he was so anxious that he brought his daughter to such a chaotic place. He was afraid that his daughter would suffer in the future, so he said, "My dear, remember that barefoot people are not afraid of those wearing shoes. Desperados are the most terrifying because you don't know what they will do. In everything, remember to protect yourself first." Nayuniu was always obedient. She said, "I understand. When I meet people who have very little, I try not to argue with them. Their lives are already very poor. I have no worries about food and drink. My parents love me. It's nothing to give in to them." Gu Mingda felt that there was nothing wrong with this understanding and said, "My dear, you are really smart." Nayuniu proudly puffed up her belly. But Gu Mingda was still frightened when he thought of what had just happened. He wanted to send his daughter back first and then ask slowly. Before he said anything, Nayuniu suddenly exclaimed, "It's the handsome brother." Gu Mingda looked in the direction Nayuniu pointed and saw a young man wearing ragged clothes and his face was painted black. His face was like this, and Gu Mingda couldn't see how beautiful he was. Seeing her father's puzzled face, Niu Niu explained, "Dad, have you forgotten? The day before yesterday at the dock, the pretty brother grabbed the old Taoist priest." Gu Mingda recalled that it was difficult to connect the young man dressed as a little beggar with the young man in brocade clothes surrounded by servants the day before yesterday. "Dad, I want to talk to the pretty brother, can I?" Niu Niu asked Gu Mingda in a low voice. The young man sat alone in the corner of the deck, looking very pitiful, and his physique did not look like a fighter, so Gu Mingda held his daughter close. "Pretty brother, you had a lot of servants serving you the day before yesterday, why are you like this today?" Niu Niu asked. After hearing this, the pretty boy suddenly burst into tears. First update. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 180. Gu Mingda looked at the miserable appearance of his little brother with runny nose and tears. Although he still couldn't connect this dirty little beggar with the handsome young man in brocade clothes yesterday, he couldn't help but believe that these two were the same. One person. After all, if it weren't for this, he wouldn't have cried so miserably. "Pretty brother, please stop crying. I'll give you my candy." Niu Niu poured out a few candies from her purse and gave them to her little brother. Mr. Jinyi has been hungry all day, and his eyes are glowing green now when he sees the food, but before he eats, he still maintains his politeness and says, "Thank you, little sister." After saying that, he stuffed the candy into his mouth. He shed tears while eating. Yesterday, that old Taoist priest, he was a big bad guy. Gu Mingda suddenly felt that his previous precautions were ridiculous. This guy looked to be only 15 or 16 years old, not much older than Gu Yan. He looked innocent and cute, so he had no ability to do bad things. When Nayuniu heard this, she originally wanted to argue. In fact, her first impression of the old Taoist priest was quite good. After taking a look at Gu Mingda, she clenched her little fists and thought to herself, "Daddy has said that you can't live a life worse than one's own people argue." Gu Mingda didn't expect that his daughter was so good at learning and applying. After listening to her daughter's caring words, she was proud to have raised a good, kind, and well-behaved child. "Pretty brother, stop crying. Are you hungry? I'll treat you to a meal," Niu Niu said. When the little brother heard this, his eyes suddenly lit up, and then he looked at Gu Mingda shyly. After all, for such an old man, it was really embarrassing for him to treat a little girl to dinner. "My money bag has been stolen. You treat me to dinner now. When I arrive in the capital and meet up with my family, I'll treat you to Ziwixianlu," said the pretty boy, patting his chest. Nayuniu shook her head and said, "I don't want to eat Ziwixianlu. I actually want to ask you if there is any way to cure seasickness." After the pretty boy heard this, he immediately said, "It may be useless for you to ask others, but you are really right to ask me." Nayuniu and Gu Mingda cheered up instantly. The little brother rummaged around in the sleeves of his worn clothes for a long time, and then took out a packet of pills. "You hid the pills so deeply," Niu Niu looked surprised. Hearing this, the younger brother's face was full of pain, and tears flowed down again, and he said, It was originally the purse where the money was supposed to be put, it was supposed to be placed in the innermost part, I put it reversely with the purse where the pills were put." As he said this, he felt more and more that everything was caused by himself. Niu Niu quickly comforted him and said, "If you don't cry, don't cry. You are a good boy. We good children don't cry." The little brother couldn't stop his tears at all. Gu Mingda on the side and asked helplessly, "How old are you?" The little brother cried and said, "I'm 17. Gu Mingda fell silent immediately. He recalled that when he was 17 years old, was he also so careless? How to take this medicine? Gu Mingde asked. Take up to 3 pills a day. If you don't get seasick, don't take it. It's the palace. The little brother had a second thought and changed his mind abruptly. It's a pill specially made by an old doctor to treat seasickness. I get seasick every time. It will be effective after eating it. Gu Mingde took the heavy bag of pills, each one about the size of a soybean, and smelled it closely. Although he could smell the smell of medicine, he couldn't tell what medicinal materials were inside. I made a lot of medicine, Gu Mingde said with emotion. However, the little brother didn't have any thoughts and said directly, I originally wanted to go to Linzhou for a visit. If everything went well, I would also take the road to see the sea. But I didn't expect that damn old Taoist priest to coax me back to the capital and ask for in such a dishonorable way. After hearing what he said, Gu Mingde secretly thought that if he really wanted to go to Linzhou, it would not be unusual to bring so many medicines. The younger brother was taken into the superior room by them. Gu Mingde used money and asked the boatman to bring a meal. After getting the food, the little brother immediately ate hard. Gu Mingde saw that he didn't have enough to eat, so he bought another one. After finishing his meal, the little brother finally came to his senses, looked at Gu Mingde with an apologetic look, and said, I'm sorry, I'm so hungry. I haven't eaten for 3 meals. Gu Mingde raised his eyebrows when he heard this. They boarded the boat yesterday morning, and the younger brother had eaten 3 meals. Was it stolen just after boarding the boat? When the younger brother heard Gu Mingde's inquiry, his face was full of hatred and he said, how did I know these people had such long hands and didn't know what they did, so they took my purse away. I was unconscious the whole time. When I was buying food, I couldn't find the money to pay the bill, and I was ridiculed by the boatman. I have never suffered like this. When I return to Beijing, I will ask my mother to make the decision for me and find out who is the evil person who stole my money. Listening to the younger brother's tearful accusations, Gu Mingde was keenly aware that it seemed that the young master's mother was the one who made the final decision. In this case, either the mother's family is stronger than the father's family, or the mother is now in charge of the family business. But he saw that the young master's words seemed to be deliberately evasive. It was obvious that he didn't want to reveal his identity, so Gu Mingde didn't ask any more questions. But Naiyunia was very curious about the old Taoist priest. Pretty brother, how did the old Taoist priest harm you? Listening to the little girl's question, the young master blushed instantly. Fortunately, his face was now dark and covered with a lot of dirt, so it was hard to see the change in his face. He didn't know where he got it, but he accurately told me about my family's affairs, and he also scared me that my family was in great trouble. He urged me to return to Beijing quickly. The young man mentioned the old Taoist priest, and he wanted to bite his gums to pieces. Naiyunia was very surprised and said, even so, handsome brother, you shouldn't be in this situation now. You have so many servants and don't seem to lack money. How can you be so miserable? The speed at which the young man fell into misery was abnormally fast in the eyes of the father and daughter. My last name is Shen, little sister, you can just call me Brother Shen. The young man kept listening to the call of handsome brother and felt embarrassed. At this time, a wave came from outside the cabin, and Brother Shen couldn't help but cover his forehead, and then quickly took out a pill from his purse. After he swallowed the pill, his complexion improved soon. Seeing that he was taking the medicine, Gu Mingde's doubts finally disappeared. After asking for Shen Ziyou's consent, he poured out some pills and gave them to Zhang Yuniang later. Shen Ziyou still remembered Naiyunia's question and explained, that ox-nosed man told me that my family was waiting for me to save it, and asked me to go to Beijing as soon as possible. He also said that I should avoid people, not charter a boat, and not bring servants. I should take a boat to Beijing like an ordinary citizen. If he hadn't said that, how could I be so miserable now? My purse was stolen. I can't even afford a meal. Second update.